The real life isolation. How did it end up there? Of course, as everything, it started very promising, very beautiful, looking like solution to everything. It was supposed to be an alternative job as we found ourselves in lockdowns and all of that. And it was the second attempt. And it started out just as the previous attempt. Beautiful. But turned into living hell in what visually otherwise was a paradise. So a nightmare in paradise. Some have said that we are in times where evil comes out and plays in the open, comes into the light, or however. People have said it in several different ways. And I have to admit that I have noticed that since some years, even people that we might have known for our whole lives or for so many years, suddenly it becomes clear what's under the surface in a lot of people. Suddenly it begins to stand out more, even in people where it maybe never did stand out, that they don't have good intentions, that they pretend to be loving and understanding, etc., and so on, that they pretend to be with you on your side, they pretend to be good. Suddenly it is becoming still so obvious more and more that it's at the end of the day all ego, that it is to be admired, to be approved, to get applause, to be trusted, etc., and so on, all those things, basically that it's based in ego. We all have the need to be special, we all have the need to be appreciated and loved and acknowledged and heard, etc. We all have that. But there is, like, we could say, a fine line between your intentions and the need for that. And of course, when we start doing good things purely out of the need of being acknowledged and recognized and applauded, etc., well, that's where things turn poisonous. And the truth eventually always comes out. And then that changes the facts of everything that has been going on. And so I ended up working for, it was supposed to be a job, but after I had sent my email, this multimillionaire called me up, and I didn't have good expectations, having met the guy before, having heard things, having had avalanches of experiences with how rare it is that someone who has grand success is actually a good person. Because in this world, mostly it takes to basically be a pretender and a desensitized person to actually achieve great success in most cases. There are always exceptions to every rule. So my expectations were not high about this person. And so I was surprised when he called me. And now looking back, obviously what I thought was real connection and things turning really personal was just someone who's able to play that game on anybody. And pretend to be like you and think like you and stuff like that. Nevertheless, I fell for it. And so I came up here and things very quickly turned personal. And so suddenly it was not just a job, but it was a relationship. It was a friendship. It was closeness. It was confiding in each other all the time. All our stories, our situations, our feelings, which turned out to be a mistake for me. Because I basically gave away what my desperate situation was, and how I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to, and how I had been robbed of all my inheritance, and etc. and so on. So this gave a person with money power the position to basically use that power in a really bad way. And so that's basically what happened, and that's why this channel experimentally at some point was dressed up, let's call it, as real life isolation with a psychopath, because it is literally true. And yeah. So it has been a very slow, painful process of realizing what's really going on. And I don't even know how to tell it so that it should be a super entertaining story. Usually the real life is only entertaining in moments, rather randomly, in its own authentic, natural, progressive way. So I wish that I could turn this channel into something super entertaining and tell the story in a super entertaining way, but at the same time, why would I wish that? I would wish that only for the channel to blow up and have follows and shares, and but if I listen to my real feeling, then I don't care about that. I'm all for being real and authentic no matter what it looks like, no matter how ignored it goes, no matter how disliked it may be at times. Yeah. So, but nevertheless, the situation is real and there's so much to say about it, and as I'm trying to address the story and why the channel is called what it's called, and then so many bits and pieces of the whole story are piling up on each other inside my mind at the same time. Which makes me want to skip to that it also serves a purpose. And my life experience already since my teens has showed me, so for decades has shown me that even in the darkest, ugliest, meanest, most painful, most tormenting things, if we keep looking, we will find a bright side, so to say, however to call it. We will find some meaning. We will find something useful. And so what blew my mind eventually one day, up here in this isolation, 1,300 meters above the world, very often throughout the winters, the whole world down underneath me is covered in a thick layer of clouds while I'm above the clouds under the blue sky. And it's beautiful, but again, it looks like paradise and feels like hellish torture. Dystopia in paradise, which is, I guess, what the world is going through. We can definitely put it like that as well. So, but what became useful is that I have had what feels like, let's call it a otherly awareness my entire life. Already as a very small child, I was looking at the adults and feeling puzzled about that they should be the leaders and the guides, and yet they would be having very juvenile things going on, very unwise situations and behaviors, and for many years growing up, I thought that adults didn't fight and argue, actually, because at least within my family I didn't get to see and hear those things. But eventually, at the age of around maybe 11, 12, somewhere there, maybe 10, I'm not sure, but somewhere around there, I got to start witnessing the adults doing those childish things. And it was shocking, and it was depressing, and it was soul-shaking, the realization that they also do these things. And so there was so many themes like that throughout my teens that basically terrified me, so that at age 15 I eventually standing alone in my room facing the wall with all my toys that I had packed away because I couldn't play anymore, no matter how much I wanted to. The slowly growing adult, the development things and other themes and occupations were taking over. Helplessly, I was changing and I didn't like it and I fought it and continued to play for over a year until I just couldn't anymore. And so there I was, 15 years old, looking at the toys in black sacks facing the wall where they were standing and feeling devastated about life already. Because by that time it was clear to me that there is nothing to live up to. There is no grand wisdom in this world. The adult world is a suffering world. You have to hand yourself over to some prescribed options of how to live your life and what to spend all your waking hours on for the sake of money. And I was seeing through how basically almost all adults have a facade, but inside, when you get to be a fly on the wall, as children so often do, you get an insight into what's really going on and how they're really feeling. And so once you have enough examples of that, then you start to be able to see through to it on most people. And so I couldn't believe that this was the world of the adults that I had to grow into, and that I had no way of stopping it, that there was no turn to go down another path. At least at that time, I didn't have presented to me things like, I don't know what would be a good example, but let's say alternative ways of living, hippies and all these kind of things. I didn't know any of all such things, and whatever, all the many things I know today, I didn't know then, but I doubt that I would have chosen any one of them. I have no idea. They weren't in my environment, so they weren't in my awareness. Maybe I would have, who knows. But nevertheless, I was born into traveling, so at 16 months old, I was already traveling. Living a part-time life in a communistic country and in the Western world of Scandinavia, 3 months here, 3 months there. So I guess this added to my broader horizon and perspective and insight to different ways of living and being and mentalities and traditions, and for sure it was all enriching. But it also means that I grew into someone who has it as if programmed in me, not just by, say, the astrology that I'm born under, if you believe in that kind of stuff, but also in the way that I grew up. And so the result is that as an adult, if I stay longer than 3 months somewhere, if I don't get to travel somewhere after 2-3 months, I start to feel a stagnance. I start to feel like becoming a part of the landscape, becoming a part of the mentality of the place, and so on. But I did manage to spend most of my adult life traveling, living the suitcase life. And what I noticed, what I experienced, there was a lot of things that I didn't expect. I thought I was going to go out and get to know the world, discover the world that I live in, and find things that I couldn't imagine. And yeah, well, I did, but things that I hadn't even thought of. And one of the most fascinating things is every time you come to the places where you grew up, you feel like as if there is a stagnance, as if people are still where they always were, even though they're getting older, even though they have children, even though they progressed in careers and whatnot. There is some factor of same old anyhow. There is some sort of stagnance. And if you keep traveling and moving and you're all the time changing place every few months, you get to grow much more according to who you really uniquely are, because your influences are not fixed. And so you get to grow more freely and much more purely according to who you really are. And of course also, if you're traveling alone out there all the time, then sometimes things are amazing, and other times you are faced with challenges that you can hardly describe or convey the details and feelings of. And so then you get to discover also your strengths, your moral, how good or bad you are, how strong or weak you are. And not to brag, but I was often blown away and surprised, all alone in silence with no witnesses. Usually without any witnesses. And even with witnesses, usually it goes unnoticed. People don't realize, right? So it was something you get to experience alone with yourself. Realizing slowly with the years and the days and the weeks what you're really made of and what you're really capable of. And of course, along with all those experiences, you still keep on growing and learning. And so, alone with myself, I'm proud of that, if that's the way to say it. Or it's something that I appreciate is maybe a better way of saying it. Yeah. But nevertheless, I always had this otherly awareness. I also experienced my mother dying when I was 16 months old, and so maybe that would be part of the reason why I would have why my otherly awareness would as well grow or something like that. I have memories of being in nursery school and being in and out of the black void, where I felt so amazingly untroubled, neutral, comfortable. And it was happening helplessly, and it was happening with my eyes open. I'd be sitting in the middle of something and having to do something. Like learning how to put my boots on or something. And I would manage to put one boot on and just disappear within a second into the black void. And of course the adults around me were puzzled, and I got to I got the bits and pieces of the story as I got older, and every time I was hearing the bits and pieces, I kind of was remembering also the bits and pieces. The memories were of course kind of pulled up to the surface, but it wasn't really until I got a friend of mine to describe, who had been meditating for a decade's time and was finally experiencing the very similar thing, but he just didn't call it the black void. But he was so happy and excited about it that we ended up sitting together somewhere in the nature on Ibiza Island and in Spain, and I was always, as usual, very curious to know all the details. Describe to me as good as you can, from the beginning to all the details. I want to know, I want to hear. And as he was describing, I found myself as if I time traveled back to those days in nursery school, and I remembered this time so clearly in detail how this used to be happening for me helplessly, and I had no control of it. and I wanted to be aware and present, and and I wasn't able to. I just wasn't able to. The world wasn't interesting enough, or I don't know what it was. I don't know. I was in and out of it. And I remember as well in the nursery school when you start walking and you go for walks hand in hand. I remember on one particular walk, and there was a lot of children in front of me, everybody hand in hand. And there was this silly, what today we would call it, a silly, childish, needless thing that the adults had done, thinking that it would improve, and it would improve us holding hands without letting go. And maybe it did, I don't know, but I remember at that time, looking back now, of course, as you're older, it's kind of mind-blowing to me how a little child in nursery school would consider that childish and needless and feel like we were being treated like fools. Right now I have the right words to express what I was feeling. And I remember that I was looking around at the children and I was looking for connection without words, which I also find weird. And so that these little things tell me what our nature is originally and how that gets destroyed with the ways that the society has been, what shall we call it, manipulated and cohorted and groomed and trained and whatnot to be in certain ways, live in certain ways, treat each other and their children in certain ways, and how basically these things that we are born with, like the meditative state, to be in the black void very easily in and out, this we should grow up with learning how to control it, which would also happen naturally as we get older, but instead it's not understood. It's ignored. You get the energy from the adults of that there's something wrong with you, right? And so you naturally, with your survival mechanism and the, security and safety feeling need mechanism, you helplessly try to be more like them, because then you're more accepted, then you're more safe, and all of those things. And so these things have somehow been deleted from our awareness, And so we live in ways that are destructive towards those things. And who knows what magical things there are in these things. We can only imagine, right? And then there is the sixth sense, the intuition. And my father always said that women have that. He didn't even call it sixth sense, but he tried so often to say it in his own words, that women especially have that, and women can see things that men tend to not be able to see, and they can feel things that, and it's true. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule. There are some men who have it too. And it seems to me that originally we all have it, but the women have a deeper thing and a more of a tendency with this stuff. And so when I hear someone say that a woman's job, aside all the things we know, is to kind of lead a man back or keep him connected or have him reconnect or whatever to his spiritual, soulful, all of that stuff, right? Kind of find the way back home sort of thing, or not get lost from home. However you can put it, it would also be in different variations from man to man, woman to woman. But it makes sense to me that that's a fact of some sorts. And I've had lots of strange experiences throughout life, writing something, describing something very beautifully, poetically in writing, and then have it come true, all of it, in the following 3 months, and then happening to read my writings, which was a poetic something, after 3 months, and realizing that, oh my god, all of this just came true in the past 3 months. And this has happened to me in different ways. And it feels like you are making an order to the universe. You're not begging, you're not asking, you're not praying, you're just describing something, and it has a feeling to it, and it has the visual visions in your mind along with it. And this is funny enough how manifestation practices are described, how even some of the Rosicrucian stuff is described. Yeah, but even that is twisted, just like spirituality. All of it, all of those things that are important to the human well-being and striving and living well, all of it is somehow, I call it hijacked, twisted, and inverted, and delivered back to us in a screwed up way, with all the most important details and facts and truths, basically. Let's just be kind and say ignored. I would rather really say taken away, taken out. And so it is with manifestation and all these things. But we can do it without writing. I have managed to do it without writing. And when it happens, there's a certain intensity to it. And I'm just guessing, but I think that the intensity, and I mean it's an emotional intensity. So if people are desensitized, they're not able to feel that emotional in silence. So they're not able to generate that kind of frequency. That kind of frequency that is so strong that it overrides even the evil stuff, mean stuff. Call it what you will. But I've had that experience, and one time it was in writing as well, and another time it was simply listening to music and dancing under the moonlight on a ship in the pitch black all alone, and noticing that there was a magical feeling energy. And so I decided to give it direction and intention, and it worked. And it blew my mind, and it worked immediately the next day. And the whole next day was exactly what I wanted, even though it was basically me imagining the impossible, and somehow it became possible. So I've had this kind of experiences in different ways, and I've also had experiences where you are connected with someone who just passed away. And I guess because we are lacking the understanding and the original connection, and having grown with things, and therefore turning into beings who kind of, for lack of a better word, have it all under control, have access to it, know how to maneuver with it, and understand what's happening, and can listen and hear, so to say, with your inner eye and ear, right? Because somehow we haven't developed that, then the experiences with those things will become weird experiences instead of something that would have more meaning to it. So the only meaning that we get out of it is that, okay, we are having a proof experience that proves that when we pass on from this physical body, then we are just passed on. We are not actually dead. And so yeah, when my grandma died only because I had bits and pieces of information through listening to older recorded things from when I was a tiny baby who could hardly say many words. I heard on one old cassette tape that, oh wow, she used to speak differently. She used to speak a bit more like when we see a very old movie and we hear how they spoke and pronounce things differently. So I guess this, I understand this existed in every country and every language. And so this was one of the Scandinavian languages. And and it surprised me that, wow, to experience and hear her, how she used to speak a little bit more like that, old-fashioned, and how then throughout the years and times, the ways of speaking change and transform. That was very interesting. And so I had this awareness, so I understood then when she passed on what happened. As I was at the funeral, I was sitting next to my crying father, who was crying about that there were so many things that he never said, and I thought, really? You, the older generations who should be wiser? Really? I told her everything. Sometimes I even overdid it, because obviously I was a younger generation, so sometimes there were maybe some things that I should not say. But I thought of it years before she passed. Many years before, already in my teens, I thought of that I don't want anything to be left unsaid. But I guess I grew up with people dying around me, so that might have added to this awareness that life is short and you never know who dies. I experienced also, when I was maybe 15, 16, a boy who was 14 died, and we were, I don't know how many hundreds of people, we were at that funeral. And so that made a big realization too, that it doesn't matter how young you are, it doesn't matter what age you are. And imagine that we have a fight and we part in anger, and that one of us passes away. I mean, so this kind of awareness I've grown up with. Let's not part in anger. Let's love as much as we can. Let's, the best thing I've ever heard in this world, in this weird world, the wisest thing I've ever heard, the most useful thing I've ever heard, was to be an example of that which you want to see in the world. Be an example of that which you want to meet in the world. And so that was kind of the only real wisdom that I took on and have been living according to as the best I could. But even I, with all this awareness and knowledge, even I went from my teens into my early 20s with so much pain and disappointment, with so much cold, hard, mean experiences from other people, especially when it came to love and men and relationships, right? These kind of things. How abusive the whole brainwash has made most people, and how men are so much easier fooled and seduced by bullshit than women, really. I mean, especially when it comes to relationships, especially when it comes to sex. And I have to admit that there was a lot of Muslims around for some years in my teens. And there I got to witness the most horrific things. How many of those see women who are not Muslim as garbage, to just be used like a cloth that you just throw away in the garbage. And so how much suffering and heartbreaking and young females growing up with an image of a guy being a strong one you feel safe with, and the freaking prince on the white horse and all these things, and then what you grow up to experience is so devastating and so heartbreaking. And how people can get themselves to do it is a whole other thing that I've been just slowly figuring out throughout life, through all the witnessing and the insight and the sensitivity and otherly awareness connection I have with the non-physical side of things, that basically people have been hollowed out. And reincarnation makes sense to me, because when I was just 1 year old, another memory that many people, especially people within the sort of medical world and who study things, they say we can't remember anything from before the age of 4. Well, I'm a living proof of that is not true. Because I remember when I was 1 year old and I saw flame, a burning flame for the first time in my life, I thought that the blue within the flame was something that if I focused on it, it would allow me to appear in a different space, in a different room, realm, call it whatever, right? And so I focused on it and was very, what to call it, confused or shocked or surprised or puzzled. Yeah, puzzled might be the right word for the feeling I had. That how come nothing happened? So that means that obviously I had a memory of something that is from outside of this physical world, from this body that I now exist in. So, yeah. Of course, then, the physical version of me, the baby there in this body, tried to then reach out and touch the blue, thinking that, how else to get in connected with it. Just instinct, right? Of course, what happened? I just burned my finger and I didn't go anywhere. And so that left me with a feeling of abandonment. I felt, abandoned from the reality that I knew I felt locked out from how I knew things to be somehow. I don't know how else to describe it. And the only reason, I'm convinced to this day, that the only reason why this memory didn't fade away was because when I was 8, I got to see a black and white photographic series of pictures, which turned out to be in a photo studio. And so there I got the last bits and pieces of the things that I didn't remember about this memory. And that was that it was a photo studio, and that the candle was on a fake cake, etc. Details like that, which don't really matter. But yeah, the pictures were black and white, and in my memory, all that was in my memory, the whole memory was centered around the blue. This strange looking specific blue that is in a fire. And yeah, the pictures, it was a series, and so the pictures showed a baby staring at the cake and then leaning towards the cake, and then eventually putting a finger up and getting closer to the flame, and in the next picture, finger in the flame, and in the next picture, the finger in the mouth, because yeah, it hurt, it burned. And so, of course, at age 8, seeing these pictures, I was freaking out over it, that, oh my god, I remember this. And nobody was listening, nobody was paying attention. I mean, shit, if a child told me that, I'd be like, oh, wow, really? Oh, what? How? I'd be curious. And by that curiosity, I would have discovered what it was that the child remembered, and that would puzzle the crap out of me, But since I've had an experience like that myself, obviously it wouldn't puzzle the hell out of me at all. But it would be so confirming, of course, to hear others having some experience that were equally far out. And so yeah, it's also obvious that what that was to me, to the baby me, it was a portal. It's what we call a portal. A time traveling or space time traveling or whatever kind of thing. It was a portal. I remembered a portal. And it was the blue in the flame. So apparently it had that frequency of that color. If not just that color, whatever, I guess it's all energy and frequency. So that's probably the better way of describing it or putting it. Yeah, and so there is lots of things inside me that I have been aware of my entire life that I was never able to explain. I was never able to really properly put words on. And since I'm up here in this isolation with this multimillionaire who turns out to be the coldest psychopath, but who is so brilliant at playing a decent human being to get sympathy, there's so many details to it that I might tell in some other video recording, whatever. But it made me realize how much the things that I'm aware of, how real, much more real. It has all become much more clear, much more. I started to be able to put words on it, and I would still say take the words just like the Bible, much more metaphorically than anything. The words more like symbols for things, because the way that I then have been able to start putting in words what I'm aware of is that we are the life force energy, the infinite intelligence. That's what we are of. That's where we come from. And so we are beings of love. Love creates life, right? Take the words as you will, take it like metaphors and symbols, whatever. But so basically we are love. And then we come in here, and here is this ego factor, and here that weakness of the ego, and together with this sensitivity that makes us feel so fragile. Those things, those natural gifts, those natural things are abused and used against us. And so it is very interesting, like, who would do that and why? And when I was 9 years old, and I heard my grandma say something along the lines of that the human beings are self-destructive and destructive and all this stuff, all these kind of things, then I pondered it, and I reflected through everything I knew up until that point about all the humans that I had ever met. And I told her, no, that's not true. There is something that does things to humans, and thereby they then do it to each other, do those things to each other. And so they become hurt, and they become more suspicious of everything, and they become self-protective, and they become afraid, and they become trying to be more safe than sorry all the time, or etc., and so on, and all such things. And amidst of all that, with all that, they end up doing wrong things and seeming to be destructive, but really in their origin they're not. Really in their origin they're so sensitive and so caring, and they don't like horror stories and horror movies and abuse and pain and the energy of people who are drunk or even on drugs is a very, 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 very negative, very horrible energy. And when we're children, we don't like this energy. And so how does it happen, right, that we end up becoming part of it, taking part in some of those things? Well, so already at age 9, I was trying to say to my grandma that there is something that doesn't have the most logical thing for me at age 9 was that there is something which does not have the same needs as humans. Because that would be the only way that it could make sense why you would be doing things that destroys humans. It must be because you don't have the same needs. Something that basically has the power in the world is destroying the nature, the water, the health, the love, the mind, the sanity, So already at age 9, that much was clear to me. And of course, I was always saying weird things, so my grandma didn't really make much of it and went on with her day. But being up here feels like the final break of something that has been my whole life coming. And so the best way to use this is, of course, to use it with other people. When people have problems, when people are in conflict, when etc. and so on, then those are the moments that I can use this, because those are the moments that there is something active going on that can make me use what I know, what I can see and feel, where I can use it actively, right? And so I don't know how to go about that other than, okay, on my day and way, I use it basically so we are the love that is supposed to lead the ego and never let it out of sight. Never ever let it out of sight. That's your number one responsibility in this life. And since most people end up letting it out of sight because it's not something that's pointed out to us, the importance, we don't see it, I can tell you that the importance is that there is something all the time making some pain and stress and whatever, and all these negative things, they basically are different sizes and shapes and types and levels of suffering. And whenever we suffer, it is the ego that actually is suffering and hurting. And when something gets hit and hurts, right, what does it do? When it gets inflamed, it swells. And so like this, the ego is swelling and swelling in this life. And the ego gets to rule things, the ego gets to make the decisions, because this awareness is missing. This awareness has been discarded, that actually you are love, which never hurts. But you are here with this ego, so you can feel this hurt and pain. But it's not actually really yours. That's not actually, part of your original being. And so with this awareness, if you grow with this awareness, you become able to be of unconditional love, and everything starts to look very different. And even though you still feel the hurt and pain and you still get tormented, well, if all of us were thinking and feeling like this and had, refined ourselves as humans like this, then we would be there for each other throughout those times. And so the ego would never have to get away with us through pain and suffering. Because there would be the grounding, the security, the embrace, the support, the love. I'll carry you through these days where you can't walk, kind of thing. But we've lost all that. It's very hard to find. There's very few of us left who are aware of these things somehow. Somehow, in some of us, you cannot kill it. And so even though I had some couple of years going from my teens into my early 20s where all my hurt and pain made me sort of build a shell or a wall around me, and I became really cold and very judgmental, and it wasn't my nature. So anything that I tried to adapt that I saw in other people as being useful or skills I didn't have, anytime I tried to learn from things like that and take them onto me and learn to be or do or whatever, well, then all those things that weren't within my nature, they always went out of control. Is one thing I noticed already in the end of my teens, that this is interesting. You know, some things become useful, but some things go completely like out of control. And this was one of those things that went out of control. I went from being mean to slowly turning something like almost evil, or I went from being cold to being mean is the more accurate way of saying it. But it only lasted a few years, you know. And of course, when all came to all, then I would always still be the caring, the insightful, loving one. But just on the surface, so in general, with people around, out there, out and about in the world, I managed to close off, which was actually a good idea. It was, to some extent, it was a good idea, but that was not being an example of what I want to see in the world. So it was just a little bit a good idea. Life is easier like that. Everybody kind of looked up to me, respected me so much, or it felt like the world lay flat before me. I could just walk all over it. It felt as if that the world was kissing my ass. Everything was easy. I had the control very easy over everybody, and I could get away with all sorts of careless things. And people would just end up as if respecting you for it, but really, I knew already then, that's not respect, that's fear. That's because I make you feel uncomfortable. And so then you want to have my time, you want to get on my good side, because your natural instinct feels that is safer and better, right? So it's the fewest people that you meet will be of the same strength and will basically either push you away or fight you or whatever. I was never really meeting that, actually. Everybody's so tame, right? We can say. Just generalize. And so what became so clear to me finally up here with this multimillionaire psychopath, really, is those matters of the soul and what it does and how severe it is, what's going on in the world, and how everything is trying to convert you into something which is basically selling your soul, just like celebrities tend to say. But without it being a spoken contract, without it being something put so black and white. It's happening all the time to everybody. There is all the time, we are constantly exposed to things where we have to shut down the voice of our soul, however to put it, our real being over soul, our godliness, our, call it whatever you will, where we have to ignore that in order to survive in this world. Usually it is for money. Usually it is for things that have to do with money. It could be status, it could be how you get up the ladder, it could be, right, anything like that. But many times it's also not about money. It's just about the status and the respect and the whatever, all the, fake versions of everything, pretentious versions of everything. And most people submit to it because the alternative is pain, suffering, disappointment, struggle. So of course it makes sense that the human system of survival, the survival mechanism, the ego, all of those things get triggered, because really originally what the ego's job is to protect you and keep you alive, right? Those things. But still, you are supposed to be the love that leads it, because otherwise it does some terrible things. But then this is you allowing it, so it's your choice to allow it, and because it's your choice, it's your responsibility, and so you're the one who pays for it in the end. You get disconnected from origin. You get disconnected from soul, from God, from, call it whatever you will. You get disconnected from it, and you get lost. And once you are disconnected from it, there is no way back home. So that means that when you leave this physical body, you're lost. You have no control. There's no way back home. There's no light. You're not connected to it. You can't see it. You can't feel it. It's gone. And so the only thing that can happen to you is that you get some illusion of that, oh, you have to be maybe reincarnated, for example, right? And that, oh, it's going to be this and that. It's like as if it's supposed to be good for you, but it's not. It's not your choices. It's not your spirit, soul, infinite intelligence, the love that you originally are. It's not that which is choosing something highly intelligent that you cannot even compare. AI is absolutely nothing next to what I'm talking about, what you originally are. So you come in here and you have a chosen constellation of a theme of a life with components to it, because you have chosen those, because and you don't even need to do that in details. The way we would think of it from our physical perspective is in detail, so that it becomes, oh my god, we could try to explain and describe forever, and keep running into that. The more detailed you get, the more accurate you get, then there is this point you keep touching where it becomes inaccurate. So that's a tricky, if anything. And so also one thing I've noticed, that this awareness that I have is something that you cannot really share with people. I can speak, and in some people it will touch something that reminds them of something, or touches some feeling of something, which is then for them a chance to remember, to start remembering, to start awakening. But I cannot share, really. I cannot really teach and share, really. So all those gurus are so fake. You cannot really share. You cannot really teach. This can only be earned. And so, to say that this world is a school, well, no, not really. It's a tricky place. But when you haven't lost the connection with origin, with who you really are, well, then it's a different story. Then yes. But still, most of what you learn here is terrible. And so yeah, you become like what we would imagine to be a superhuman, some superhero, but it's not at all the way it looks in stories and movies. It doesn't look like that. It doesn't look or feel attractive, but you do feel safe around it when it's in action, yeah. But you also do feel a bit freaked out about it until you see the effects of it, you know. And so those people, they don't look like superheroes. They don't appear as super attractive something. They don't appear like something wow. On the contrary, actually. And it's not something you can feel proud of, really. It's not something you can hardly, of course you feel grateful for it, but there is a mixed feeling about it, living in this world, because it's very hard. It's very painful. It often makes you think like, well, some little part of me, the little weak part of me, the little, the one that hurts and feels the pains of things, and this part of me would love to just be stupid, because stupid people are always happy. Stupid people just follow whatever seems to be the norm and the rule and la la la. They don't seem to notice anything. And so I think that these people, those are the lost people. They have been probably reincarnated so many times. And with every life, they are so far from their origin, that it's forgotten, it's gone, the connection is no longer there. And so that's what people call NPCs. Those are basically like some kind of, much like a computer, you give it a program and it just follows that, And these people, yeah, okay, they become functionaries, and they're kind of practical to have around because they will do all the chores that others don't want to do. That's definitely one factor in it all. That is definitely one factor. But originally, divine life without the manipulative, non-human need something, the world would look so different without it. We'd be working, roughly said, a few hours a day, doing really meaningful things that keep us abundant, well, and alive. We would not be slaves to money. We would be depending on two things: a healthy nature and the sanity and love in each other. The loving sanity in each other. Only these two things would we be depending on. So basically each other and the humans. I mean each other and the nature, right? Humans and nature. It would be as simple as that. And we would build things not because we need a house. We would build things out of passion and artistry and experience true genius. True genius is not success and millions and billions and being desensitized and cold, and it seems like as if you're like a balanced out Buddha. No, you're just desensitized and cold, and you give a shit. And you laugh at all the horrific things that are going on in this world. You just sit and smile and try to tell people that, oh, it's all an illusion. Oh, you psychopath. You know? Yeah, everything is so twisted. But yeah, to realize and start remembering some of these things means that one has the chance to start making better choices, to start living consciously all the time, to stop hurting people, to stop letting each other down, to prevent the feelings of abandonment and all these things. We have to make efforts for these things. Unfortunately, this world is a battlefield, so yes, we have to make efforts and make sacrifices for each other. But funny enough, that is what makes you rest in yourself. That is what makes you feel satisfied inside as a human being. Ironically enough. To be needed. To see that you can affect and make a good difference. That is really where the real, true feeling happiness comes in. So yeah, when people say, oh, harvest and soul harvest, well, it's a way of putting it. It's you know, whatever words we got to describe what's going on. It's one way of saying it. It's one way of saying it. It's one descriptive way of putting it. That is what's happening. This world is run by some trickery shit that abuses everything about you and your nature to basically, slowly and gradually but surely trick you into making choices that disconnect you from your origin, from your soul. That's the way of putting it. Yeah. And then you get to be this hollow thing. And then through that hollow space, we can say, this, what is not human, what is not physical, it gets to rule you, it gets to live through you. And an easy way to understand it is, now you have the AI doing exactly the same thing. Manipulating you, luring you in, oh, you're my best friend, oh, you know. Is the way people end up feeling, right? And then they do things, they deliver things, they use things out in the real world that is from the AI. And so it's fake, it's synthetic, it has no depth, and so on. Of course, again, one could be really, really smart and use some bits and pieces just to get unstuck, just to be inspired, just to push creativity, move creativity when it gets stuck. Sure. But that's not how most people use it, because most people are really not that bright, let's just say. So there you have the same thing happening, where it's just the AI that gets to live through people. So again, that is the human nature being used and abused, basically. Yeah. I could talk forever about this stuff, but without human conversations, questions, so on and so forth, without the active situations where this knowledge becomes actively used and activated, it's rather chaotic the way that I can talk about it, perhaps, I guess we can say. There is no proper structure, and for me to sit and write and do scripted stuff, no, forget about it. I have written a lot about this stuff, and it becomes very repetitive because it's just me alone. There is no questions, there is no examples and constellations to approach it in this practical way to... But it is very much the same at the end of the day anyway. But of course, being isolated alone on a mountain, there's not the real life events and happenings around me to end up having different situations that address different situations, that give examples of this onto different situations and constellations and so on. So without the human interaction, the way that I'm talking about it here is really the best way that I can do it. And whoever is supposed to hear it is definitely gonna end up hearing it. So, don't let this world trick you away from your origin, because the consequence of that, once you leave this physical body, powerless and stuck in all the pain and torment that you have ever contributed.